Hello out there, and it is review time today with the Kizer Theta. And the Theta here is my first knife that was designed by Elijah Isham. All of Isham's designs, they've been pretty interesting to me, at least from a visual perspective, but functionally a lot of his stuff just on paper hasn't worked for me, just in the way that it looks so artistic with all the cutouts. And then some of the models that look like they'd be really functional are just really big, like the Megatherium. So when I first saw the Theta, I thought, this is an Isham design that I will probably want to get. And then when I picked it up and had it in hand at Blade Show, I knew I wanted to get it. But then some months went by and it just didn't happen for me. You know, you can't have everything that you want. Different things became priority. And yeah, I just let this one pass me by. And eventually, this knife popped up in a raffle, and I won that raffle on Instagram. And let me tell you guys, quick PSA, not going to try to get too far off topic, but if you have never been involved in any raffles for knives, don't do it. You might be watching right now thinking about how lucky I was to win this, but what you aren't seeing are all of the raffles that I lost in order to win this one. It is a money pit. It is a bad financial decision. Do not do it. That's the best advice I can ever give you. But I did end up getting this one, and from the moment I got it in hand, I started thinking about another knife. And that's not good. You never want that feeling when you unbox a knife and immediately start thinking about another knife. And the knife that I was thinking of was, and some of you might be guessing it already, the Kizer Rogue. I always like to do comparisons between, two knives of the same brand, because if you're going to spend money on a certain brand, why not get the best bang for your buck? And within having this knife for just a few minutes, I was thinking about the comparison video that I was going to make between these two knives, talking about how the Theta just can't stand up to the Rogue and how the Rogue is a better knife for cheaper money, all that good stuff. And that might be true, and we are going to get back to that, and it's certainly a discussion that needs to be had. But what has happened over time with me and the Theta is this knife has started to get its own feet beneath it. It's standing on its own, and I'm liking it a lot for what it is, and I'm surprised to say that. So it's experiences like this that make me sort of reconsider doing the first look videos as often as I do, and maybe make me want to revisit things and do more follow-up videos, because this is one that I just developed an appreciation for over time. It doesn't mean it's a great knife, and it doesn't mean that it's going to be for everybody, but there are some characteristics to the knife that I really do appreciate, and we're going to get into all of that right now. So let's just start with the basic specs. What we have is a blade of S35 VN steel, comes in right around 3¼ inches of cutting edge. So for size comparison, here's that Rogue again. The Rogue is a little bit shorter in cutting edge, just beneath 3 inches. Other size comparisons that might be interesting, here's the Kershaw bare knuckle. Of course, we are going to do a mini Griptilian. This is a pretty sweet new one in M390, by the way. Stoked about that. And a Kershaw leak. Oh, and one more. Benchmade 943. All right, so now all that stuff's out of the way, let's take a look at some other aspects of the blade that are interesting. So we do have a flat grind. We have a very big cutout hole, and this will be good for opening and deployment in a couple different ways, which we'll get to in a bit. One interesting thing to note with the edge termination is that there's this sort of dead spot, and it does look on camera a little bit weird and uneven. I'm not sure how intentional this was or what the idea was here. My guess is that they wanted to leave just a little bit of space so that it would be easier to sharpen instead of, and let me see if I have a knife right here that does it. So yeah, instead of having something, and this is just really rough, but instead of having something like this, which is never really good and creates a lot of dead spots, leaving it open maybe will make it better, but it's not really something that is good enough to really like get comfortable in as a choil, but you can put your finger right here, and as long as you're not doing anything too aggressive, you might be somewhat safe. When it comes to the blade shape, though, I really, really like this this design. So I'm a big fan of Wharncliffe's, but I do like just a little bit of belly, and this is sort of the perfect kind of look. I like a lot of blades, aesthetically and functionally, but there aren't going to be very many that when it comes to like this measure of belly that are going to be superior to this. So I really do like that. And that's one of the things that drew me to some of Isham's other designs, is that that the blades look good, and then, you know, some of the other aspects of the knife just are less appealing. And this, you know, this sort of tied everything together. Let's take a look at the weight. So we are working with a titanium frame lock. The titanium scales are pretty thick though. So if we're going to bring the Rogue back, you can see pretty decent comparison. It is a little bit thicker. And the 943. So the weight of this knife, almost 4 ounces. So it isn't heavy. It doesn't feel heavy in hand. It is slightly heavier than some of the other things that you're going to see, but you know, under 4 ounces, not really ever going to be an issue. And then as we move on back, you see there is no jimping. So no jimping, the hand is going to lock in fairly well, which we'll talk about. One of the really interesting design qualities here is you can see it's completely open. The number of screws in this knife is extremely minimal. We have the pivot here. We have the screw that holds in the stainless steel interface for the lockup. And then we have the pocket clip screws, and then basically one set of screws for the single standoff. So that makes it pretty interesting. I mean, completely open. So you can see right inside, there isn't any extra milling on the titanium. But like I said, because of the weight being still so agreeable, there really isn't any need for it. And the machining that they did do on the titanium is pretty darn good. So let's take a look at this. I really like the design features of this titanium and the way they just contoured it. They didn't do anything fancy, but it's just a simple set of lines that, you know, extend even despite the fact that you have, you know, the finger grooves here. It extends, and the same thing on the backside. The lines just like permeate through. Really good looking. And then the design to the clip. I talked about this one in a video just the other day, that I really like the fact that there's symmetry between the clip and the actual design on the frame. So you don't see that all that often, and sometimes when you do see it, it doesn't work. But this clip is super cool and classy and fits right in with the rest of the knife. The lockup on this knife is really excellent. I've had zero issues with it. No movement whatsoever. Despite a lot of opening and closing and a lot of using, it's just been very solid. One thing to note, a little bit that Kizer has progressed with, or maybe upgraded or updated, is this does have their a newer pivot. So a lot of their pivots in the past had this look to it. And I don't know, people sort of got over that. And I like this pivot, but I think it's good that they're not using it on everything anymore. You know, it's a good proprietary pivot to have on like one knife or two, but to put it on everything, I don't know, I just sort of got tired of it. A lot of people did, and yeah, so now they're doing some more different things. Like I said, we do have a stainless steel interface. That's a good look at the lockup. The centering is really good. Pocket clip is not reversible, so yeah, we are in one position land, which for me is just fine. No worries there at all. Ergonomically, this knife isn't perfect, and this was one of the things that I was thinking about when I was going to compare it to the Rogue. It's not a perfect knife in hand. If you have large hands, then it probably will not work for you, and there are other Isham designs that most likely will. But for me, it's a little bit snug, but it works just fine. And after a little bit of time, it gets in the hand, and you find that comfortable like Goldilocks spot. Do I wish there was a little bit of jimping? Yes, especially since you have this downslope on the spine of the knife. So like your thumb will just naturally slide a little bit. So it could be a little bit better in that regard. One other thing that I've noticed is when I grip the knife really hard, and let's see if we can get this focused. when I grip the knife hard, my forefinger right here pushing into this spot, it does create a slight hot spot sometimes. And so it's one of those things where depending on the angle and the way that my finger is set in here, it'll happen, and then I just have to adjust and find like a more comfortable spot where it isn't like biting. And that could probably be fixed with maybe a little bit of sandpaper, like right here. Let's see. Like right here probably. That's the sharp spot. But I haven't done that, and I'm not in any hurry to. Obviously, you know, you shouldn't have to do anything like that, but it's also for me not a big enough issue in order to, you know, force me to make that slight functional mod. Again, just one more time, let me show the real estate. So it's a little bit crammed, but it gets comfortable, you know, once you find that sweet spot. But again, larger hands might have a little bit of an issue. And while the titanium isn't particularly slick, I mean, my hands do sweat, so it does get a little bit slick, and there isn't any measure of traction. You know, there is a coating, but it's not like a powder coating. And speaking of coating, actually, let's show this right now. So here is, and you can see it coming into the light right now. This will get snail trails, just like wear marks, and I have a bad one, right? Look at that. No idea how that happened. I just noticed it the other day. I was like, shit. Oh well, you know, and you can see a lot of wear marks just from carrying it. That's going to happen. Just sort of comes with the territory. So if you want your knives to look pristine and you're going to carry this one, it probably won't stay that way. Now, I could do a couple things. I could stonewash it. I could, you know, take this this finish off and polish it up. Number of things that I could do, and maybe long term I'll do something like that. But honestly, like you can see, it's sort of hard to actually catch it in the light. So looking at the knife, just usually, I mean, you probably, or maybe you did, but you probably didn't notice that there was a scratch on it until just now. You know, and that's sort of how it is just in the light as well. It doesn't show up that often until you're really looking for it, and then it jumps out at you. Another opportunity with the knife, a way that it could have been better, and the way that it is best, actually, funny how it goes sort of both ways here, is the action. So the opening action of the knife is not really ideal. It's not what I would want it to be. It's not perfect. It's smooth and it's fine, but it just doesn't fly the way that I want it to. Taking a look at the flipper, we have this raised flipper, and so I guess I'm just gonna join the club and call it light switching. So when you light switch, the knife flies out, and it's fine. And you have pretty good action, and there's really no way that if you pull with any kind of force, that the knife isn't gonna open all the way. Now, you can, you know, just break the detent and not have it fly open. That's possible. The detent is strong enough to hold the knife in, like if I shake as much as I want, it's not going anywhere. But it also just isn't like spring-loaded where once you break it, it's going to just fly. That's not going to happen. So you can do stuff like this. So flipping it is just fine. Not great though. And then I actually do the spider flick. So that works out really well because you have this huge cutout. It's comfortable. Works just about every time. Trying to use this to flick it open this way is difficult. You can't really use this hole for that because the knife has to come out and you can't really push up. So it's like a, you know, it's a weird kind of deployment. You can slow roll it this way though. So that's really nice for people who like being able to do that. So, and it does pop out pretty well. So that's sort of the iffy part of the action, but the best part is the closing. This knife is super smooth. When I first got it, I disassembled it, I cleaned it up, I lubricated it because winning it in the raffle, it was slightly used and it looked pretty much brand new, but you know, the action left a little bit to be desired. So I took it apart. Super easy deconstruction because of, you know, how just minimalist the screws are. So I took it apart, and when I put it back together and lubricated it, I mean, this knife just feels great. The amount of resistance you have when you close the knife is minimal. So yeah, I'll put a little video in if I haven't already. But yeah, it's a really fun knife to close. So can't say enough about it there. As far as edge retention and the steel and the S35VN, I mean, I've carried this knife a lot and I've used it a lot. Haven't done anything too aggressive with it, just basic boxes here and there, stuff at work, and it's still super sharp. I touched it up when I first got it, and it's just been maintaining pretty well. So I do like that about S35VN, and more I'm starting to appreciate just how easy it is to maintain versus S30 at least. So still love S30, but S35VN I completely understand. So now let's talk about price and value. So the price of this knife is 180 bucks. That's what it runs for new. That's expensive, obviously. It's a very expensive knife. Is it worth it is going to be a matter of perspective. When we're doing the comparison, you know, the thing that I was thinking about when I first picked up the knife with the Kizer Rogue was, well, we have a similar kind of blade style. We have the same steel in S35VN. We have titanium, but on the Rogue here we have jimping and some cutouts to make it a little bit better in hand. And as a functional tool, this knife is probably going to be a little bit better. And it's going to run about $115 to $120. So that price difference there creates for me a ton of value for the Rogue, and it does hurt a little bit the idea of the Theta. But if you're one of those people who really loves the Elijah Isham designs, and you want to get one of his knives in your hand and in your pocket that you're going to be able to use, you know, and use hard if you need to, and actually, you know, have some practicality to it versus some of his other stuff. You know, if you are a big Isham fan, then this knife is it's gonna work just well for you. It's gonna be great. And if you really prefer the look of the blade and you prefer the other aspects of the knife that sort of differentiate it from the Rogue in that, you know, it's on bearings and it's a little bit smoother closing and, you know, the other qualities to it, then sure, then this is going to be a good investment. If you were just looking for a standard tool, a good knife to break down a bunch of boxes and do a lot of work, then yes, 100%, I would recommend the Rogue over the Theta. But again, for those Isham fans, they might not be as worried about that, and they might just want to have one of his designs in the pocket. And even though the value of this knife isn't going to resonate with everybody, it is definitely going to resonate with the people who need to use their knives but want to have something from Elijah Isham that is going to be able to get everything done that they need. So hopefully that aspect of it made sense. I'm not trying to cop out and say it's a good value or a bad value. I just think that this sort of is appealing to a specific type of person, and my guess is at this point that person might already have this knife. But if you are able to come across this at a cheaper price, it'll only make it way more attractive. I did see them on sale somewhat recently for about $140. And $140, I still think I prefer the Rogue at any price. I think I prefer the Rogue over this just being a better knife. But again, that's just all in the eye of the beholder. So let me know what you think, guys. Any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, let me know down below. Really appreciate you watching this full review of the Kizer Theta. Take care and have a good one.